Welcome back to Become a Calm Mama. I am your host. I'm Darlene Childress, host of this podcast, and I am a life and parenting coach. And today's topic is screen-free mindset. And so I'm going to kind of explain what I mean by that and then give you some really strong strategies of how to manage screen time in your family, which I know is a big concern for all of you, especially in light of some of the things that we've been hearing in the news lately, just about the anxiety and depression and just how much our youth are struggling and how much technology is really contributing to that. So I'm sure you're concerned. I'm sure you really want to find strategies for that. So I'm going to give you some today, which is great. So screen-free mindset. Okay, so let me first go back and say a little background on why I'm doing this episode. One thing that I am committed to as a coach and as a parenting coach is that I don't tell you what to do in terms of, what your values should be. So I don't say, you should eat this food or your kids should sleep at this time. I really try to help you understand your values and then give you strategies to make those happen. And if you're aligned with my approach, I know that your values are to be a compassionate parent while also staying calm and setting limits and boundaries, right? So in that way, we're all aligned, but kind of in the nitty gritty of, do we let our kids stay up late? Do we let them eat cookies or not eat cookies or things like that? I really don't want to get in the weeds on all of those specifics. So I was talking to my friend about this and I said, I really want to do this episode where I talk about limiting screen time for kids. And I said to my best friend, Tiffany, I said, I'm struggling with it because I don't really want to tell people what to do. And I also don't really want to make parents feel more stressed or have moms feel things that they're, feel guilty. She said, you're right. You don't tell people what to do except like you don't believe in spanking. And I was like, yeah, I don't believe in spanking. And I definitely say, don't hurt your kids, right? Don't hit your kids. As we talked about it a little bit more, I realized that what I stand for is not harming children. And what I am always doing is advocating strategies so that we don't hurt kids, right? That we don't shame them, we don't spank them, we don't create pain, we don't create emotional distance and all of that. And as I have been going through the research recently, and actually for the last 15 years, as I've raised my kids in a technology-based society, I've made decisions about how I want to approach technology and creating a slow tech family. And what I've realized is that a lot of technology, a lot of screen use does hurt children. When young adults have excessive opportunity to be on their devices, to be in social media, to have unfettered access to the internet, kids can get hurt in the virtual world. And we don't have a lot of limits and a lot of protections for children in the virtual world. A lot of that is hardware-based. Tech companies make it very difficult for parents to create parental controls. The tech companies aren't actually interested in limiting children's use because they get more and more money and revenue and data and all of that from the more use of any human, right? Children included. So there's not a lot of motivation to create limits, and then the onus then becomes on us as the parents. I don't like to say don't let your kids use devices or something like that because it feels really, shaming, and I don't want to do that to you ever. But I do want to give you best practices. And I think that's really helpful in parenting because it can be really difficult to figure out what I should do, especially when there aren't a lot of clear guidelines about something. We now kind of know in general, about nutrients and whether kids should have sugar or not, or whether they should have vegetables. And we kind of generally know about how much sleep kids should get. And so when you have these basic understandings of what fundamentally a human needs to grow and develop, you can kind of implement that with a lot of grace for yourself. But when you have the structure and the backbone of these are the best practices, these are sort of ideal scenario, and you work from there, then if you get a good couple weeks in, you're feeling good. Maybe have a week where your kid is sick and they overuse technology for a week or two, or you're ill or whatever it is, that's fine. You just reset back to that kind of baseline ideal philosophy. So that's what I want to give to you today. Just as a premise here, I would like to really clarify that over-reliance on tech, over-reliance on devices is hurting kids. And so straight off the bat, I want to give you some numbers about that. Kids who are 3 to 7 year olds, according to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, according to Pediatrics Magazine, the Journal of Adolescent Health, there's a lot of guidelines now being established about how much time kids should spend on any sort of screen, whether that's an iPad, the television, your phone, a computer, a Kindle, anything like that. Not a Kindle for reading, but a Kindle with like images. 0 to 3 should be 0. That's just the pediatric recommendation, is that kids under 3 don't need any screen time at all. 3 to 7, it's a half an hour to an hour a day. So just really think about that. Includes all device use, including your phone if you hand it to them at a restaurant or something like that. From 7 to 12, it should be about an hour total a day for discretionary screen time. For 12 to 15, 1.5 hours. So that includes watching television, scrolling on social media, spending time talking on the phone and FaceTiming their friends. And then after 16, 2 hours is the recommendation of discretionary screen time. Crazy enough, most kids from like age 5 and up are getting around 5 hours a day of discretionary use. So that means in their free time, they're spending 5+ hours. So that is a lot, considering that at 16 years old, 2 hours is the recommendation. Now, you hear this and you're like, okay, I get it. It's harming my kids. So what do I do about it? Because my kids love it and I'm busy and I'm stressed and I don't know how to manage the time and their boredom and all of it, right? So what I wanted to talk about was this concept of screen-free mindset. What does that mean? Like, as a life coach, right? I help you figure out how to structure your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions to align with your values. If you have a default mindset or a negative mindset around something like, oh my God, I'm a terrible mother, that's going to make you feel overwhelmed and sad. And then you're going to then take actions, either overproductivity or giving up. And then you don't get the life that you want. So we all have default negative mindsets. And that's like what your brain goes to when it's on automatic. So one thing I teach all the time is that misbehavior is not an emergency. That's an intentional mindset, because your default thought is, oh my God, my kid hit the kid on the park and this is a disaster and all the moms are going to judge me and I got to do something about it and this is an emergency and I better do something now. And you feel like really stressed about it. And a stressed mind does not make the best decisions. So we train our brains, our mom brain, to say misbehavior is not an emergency. This is not an emergency. And then when you are you're soothing your nervous system by saying this is not an emergency, you can then move forward and make a better decision and connect with your kid and then set some limits and follow that kind of calm mama process. Okay, so that's my role as a life coach, and that's a big part about, managing your mind, your mindset. So now, what is screen-free mindset? Screen-free mindset is making an intentional decision that your child's or your children's free, unstructured time should be screen-free as the default choice. So you're turning your default thinking into screen-free. So for example, let me give you some examples. Here's one, like in the doctor's office, right? Your kids are waiting their turn and you hand them your phone so that they can watch a little bit of Bluey or whatever, and you occupy them with the device. That is using the device as the default. And I want you to switch that to screen-free default, a screen-free mindset, thinking I'm not going to give my child the phone at the restaurant or in the doctor's office or while I'm cooking or, in the mornings after they get dressed. I'm going to actively choose that unstructured free time is screen-free in this family. When you choose that as the parent, and you don't allow that screen to be the first option, second option, third option, when you let that be sort of the, like, not last case scenario, because I don't want it to be something that you give into. I just want you to be intentional about when you are allowed to use screens in your family and when you aren't, and making a decision that there are times that we don't do that. We don't do that while we're waiting. We don't do that in the morning. We don't do that in the car. We don't do that right when we get home from something. We don't do it when the friends are over. We don't do it while we're eating, like I said. Thinking about this as your mindset will help you not feel the pressure to give in to your kids' desire to have screen. Last week I talked about how we want to encourage boredom. We need to give our kids opportunities to find other solutions and other ways to entertain themselves and other ways to cope with messy feelings or hard moments without using technology as a pacifier. A lot of you will give up the kids' binky, their pacifier around age 3 or 2.5 or something like that, because it's not in their best interest to have that pacifier. It's not good for their teeth. It's not good for their emotional regulation and all of that. And that's kind of the same thing with screens. We over pacify kids by giving them the device in times when we really want them to be able to practice new skills. Now, when we give our kids the device as the default, it does have a negative effect on them. National Institutes of Health has a National Library of Medicine. It's a clearinghouse for reputable medical and psychological studies. You can look it up, the National Institute of Health, and they have tons and tons of really highly qualified research in there. And I read this article about the impacts of screens on kids, overuse, so outside of those guidelines that I read a few minutes ago. Kids who have more than is recommended amount of time, they have worse executive functioning, their academic performance declines, they are delayed in language development, they have detrimental effects on social and emotional growth, they are more likely to have obesity, sleep disorders, mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. It can fuel aggression, it can harm one's psychological health. It can impair emotional comprehension, make it harder to interpret emotions. All of these negative effects when your kids have too much screen time, more than what is recommended. So if you have a 7-year-old and they're using more than 1 hour a day total, including television, iPad, your phone, computer games, any of that, then they are not developing in the most optimum sense. Now, here's why. There is an opportunity cost every time your child uses their device. They are not using that time and that brain and that body to do something else. So the more time that's taken up by devices, the less opportunity there is for other parts of their body, emotional and mental development. So one of the things that happens is that you don't move your body a lot of times when you're using screens. So that's a missed opportunity. You don't have free play. You don't spend time outside. You may not be sleeping. You're probably not reading or drawing. You're not interacting with other people face to face because you have your face in an iPad. If you have multiple kids and they all have iPads and they all get individual time, well, that's a missed opportunity of sitting together and doing something together with their sibling or with you. Actually, as an opportunity cost just for pure play with their sibling when they spend most of their free time on their devices. They don't learn to wait. They don't learn to entertain themselves. Their impulse control is affected, and their ability to sustain attention is affected. You think about like what it takes to follow a bumblebee in real life outside, can kind of take a while to like find it, and then it goes away and you find it again. Oh, there it is. And just like paying attention to that, and your whole body is engaged versus watching a little bumblebee on a video. There's just such a different experience. So what we want to be doing is we want to be creating downtime. We want to create screen-free time. We want to have that be a priority, that our mindset is that most of my child's life is screen-free. That you have a little kid, They have 24 hours in a day, and they're going to spend less than an hour of that on their device. That's incredible if you really commit to most of our life is screen free. Why we do that is because kids, they're wired to create and explore and be bored. And the more we entertain our kids, the more we pacify them, then they don't know what to do when they are in that boredom gap, like I talked about last week. They don't get to discover and be in that discovery mode that I talked about. So we don't want to have this entire generation of children not being able to deepen their own internal worlds and their own internal guide about playing and what interests them and following their own curiosity and creativity. So I hope I've convinced you that a screen-free mindset is valuable and it's really, really important, that it is a benefit to your kids, that when you have them using more screen than is recommended in a day or in a week, that your kids are negatively impacted. Now, I don't want you to feel like, oh my God, I've ruined my children. I let them watch 2 hours a day and they're only 5 years old or whatever. Don't do that. There is no reason to look back and be like, I messed them up. For one, your kid's brain is neuroplastic. They're still developing. You're a great parent. You have lots of time. It's not a big deal. So don't do any of that guilt and like that looking back and beating yourself up, because it's really not useful. That's not a great mindset. It's not helpful. What we want to do is have a positive mindset of, oh, look, I have this new information. I'm going to adopt a screen-free mindset for my family, and we're going to move forward, and I'm going to help my kids learn how to be bored, learn how to find their own interests, learn how to overcome discomfort without having technology as their go-to. What is your role as a parent? What is it, right? So you have a couple of different roles. One is setting the boundary. And so I'm going to walk you through a step-by-step guideline of how to do that. The others are using those parental controls on your devices, on your phones. One thing that's handy to have is just a small personal safe in your family that you use to lock up stuff that you don't want your kids to have access to. Instead of trying to teach your kids to be responsible and not sneak the iPad and not sneak the iPhone and not sneak the remote control and all of that, that's a really hard thing for them to resist. And so we want to just have it out of sight, out of mind. So if you want to have some of these guidelines and put these boundaries in place, also put some physical boundaries in place as well. I don't know how much our little safe costs, but wasn't that expensive. Like, I don't remember, to be honest. And we just have it in a cupboard and it has a code, and we just have put computer cables, remote controls, phones, iPads, iTouches, all of that stuff just kind of locked away. And then it comes out at times when I say it's okay, and I hand it to them. To be honest, we also use the safe because we have a liquor cabinet that is locked with a magnet key. And so we keep the magnet key in there. We just keep everything kind of that we don't want our kids to be tempted by in that space. Obviously, they're getting older now, so it's less of an issue, but it's been very handy. Okay, understanding the parental limits on the phone, on the iPad, on the computer, putting up those blocks that block certain websites, that block pornography, that block certain searches, all of those, dismantling Discord and Instagram and Snapchat and things like that. If your kid's not really ready for any of those social media apps, as well as YouTube. Most likely your child under 10 does not need to ever have access to YouTube. It's not necessary. That's enough programming and activities that are outside of YouTube that your kids can have access to. YouTube can be such a rabbit hole, and the way the algorithm is, it really can hurt your child. The explore page and what comes up on the side is so tempting to little kids. So I know it's handy because you don't have to be logged into like certain streaming services or whatever. But in general, I would say just to block YouTube as well. So as a parent, you want to set the boundaries and you want to use those behavioral controls. Another strategy is to just never allow screens in the bedroom until kids are 14 or whatever. depends on your computer, the computer they use for school and where they do their studying. But for the most part, kids don't really need to have devices in their bedroom. And if they do, you can also have those be turned in at the end of the night so that you know that they're getting their sleep. And then, of course, I want you to be thinking about your own screen time, knowing how when your face is on your phone, you might be doing something important, like looking up a recipe for dinner, but to your child, they don't know what you're doing on your device. So the more analog you can bring things in and the, list making and, using a laptop instead of your phone or something like that. So your child can look over your shoulder and see what you're doing so it doesn't look like you're completely distant. I would encourage you to set screen limits for yourself around scrolling on Instagram or Twitter or TikTok or whatever it is that you are interested in. For me personally, over the last few months, I've just taken all that stuff off my phone because I don't want to be mindlessly looking at it anymore. Because I want to be able to be present in my life and also be able to pay attention to my kids when they're around. Let's get into some of this actual nuts and bolts of how to do this. So we want to just remember that the value is a screen-free life as much as possible, with the screen being like dessert. So you think about your child's diet, how you don't base your life around the dessert, right? You don't look at their eating habits and you're like, okay, where am I going to put in dessert here? Or let's structure our whole eating around dessert. You don't do that. You go, where are the basic meals? What's the rhythm of our day? What do I want them to be eating? And then dessert is just like a bonus. So in a screen-free mindset, screen is a bonus. Screen is dessert. Screen is not essential. It's not an absolute nutritional need, which it is not. Kids don't need devices, okay? They don't, that's not developmentally necessary. All right, so I'm going to go through the numbers again and then talk about how to do your own tech plan. So again, under 3, 0, no use. They never need it. Don't hand them your phone at a restaurant. Don't, it's not, okay, I'm saying don't, but of course you can. I'm just saying when you do that, it's an opportunity cost. Little kids, we really don't want them to get accustomed to having a tech pacifier. So 3 to 7, half an hour to 1 hour a day is the recommendation from Pediatrics Magazine and the CDC. 7 to 12, which is pretty much all of elementary school and up to the beginning of middle school, is 1 hour a day. And then throughout middle school, it would be 1.5 hours. And then after 16, about 2 hours. So I know it's harder after 16, and I'll talk about that in a couple of episodes from now, how to teach your teenagers how to handle their own tech. But for now, just kind of keeping these guidelines in place. Now, I'm going to be really honest that I had much stricter rules for my kids during the time of their development. So when they were 0 to 5, we did 1 hour a week, not an hour a day. So the kids were really only allowed to watch 1 or 2 shows 1 day a week. And so it was kind of like a 20-minute show here, a 20-minute show there, or maybe 2 20-minute shows, on a Saturday morning. I really kept it super limited. That was on purpose. And then from 5 to 10, they also still did not use devices Monday through Thursday. So we just had a screen-free life Monday through Thursday. There was nothing ever before school, has never happened before school. And then nothing really after school, all through elementary school and beginning of middle school. We just had it on the weekend, and you could do 1 to 2 hours on the weekend. So it was 1 hour on a Saturday and 2 hours on a Sunday. I wasn't that strict about it. It just was 1 to 2 hours on the weekend. I did not let my kids play video games until Sawyer was 10, and neither of them got a device until Sawyer was 12. That's my younger one. So because they're so close in age and only 1 grade apart, we just kind of did things as if they were twins in some ways. When Sawyer turned 10, they could play video games on the weekend for 1 hour. They didn't get phones until Sawyer was 12, so Lincoln would be 14. And there was a lot of screen time limits on their device. So they have very, very limited amount of time. Now, they could play video games in middle school, like the late middle school and high school. They could play them on the weekdays as long as their grades were 3.0. If they dropped below, they could only do it on the weekends. If they dropped below a 1.0, then they couldn't have them at all. That worked really well, I gotta say, until the pandemic, and then whatever. All the rules were broken in our family after the pandemic. But by that time, my kids were 14 and 16, so it was a little bit different for us. We didn't have iPads back then, but the kids did have iTouches, and they could use them on car drives over an hour and on airplanes. That was it. They never really got to use those devices at all. It was just not part of their life. So anytime they were using any sort of device, it was the television in the family room, and they had to share what they were looking at. Sometimes they could use my phone for a little bit, like they could take turns, like and play Subway Surfer or something like that. I don't remember all the games, but then they'd have to take turns, and it would be on the weekends still. We did family movies on Fridays, so that was always kind of fun. We would often have friends over on Fridays, so that wouldn't end up happening. But if there was nothing going on, we would have family movies on Fridays. And family time, doing digital entertainment as a group is very different than individual screens. So you can decide how you want to handle your 1 hour. Is that as a group with your kids, your 7 to 12-year-olds, in the evening, you guys all watch a show together? That's so much more valuable than each kid on an iPad separate from each other in their own immersed world. And then the way I handled the summer was basically like whatever I was doing on the weekends was what I did in the summer. So I kind of acted as if the summer was weekends. Okay, I hope that is helpful. If you're doing something different, that's fine. Just follow the CDC's guidelines. But if you kind of want to be a little bit more observant, you can listen back to the way I did it, or you can email me and I'll tell you exactly how I handled it. Okay, so now here's the strategies. I know we're going a little bit long, but I think this is an important episode. Okay, so here are the strategies. 1, the first thing you always have to do when you set up a rule or a limit or a new rhythm or a new routine is you have to make some decisions. So you want to figure out your screen time policy. Really think about what is dessert. When do you serve dessert? When do you serve screens? Do you do it every day? Do you do it once a week? When you do it, is it for an hour? Is it for less than an hour? How does it work in your family? These are the questions you have to ask yourself. When do you want your kids to use tech? That means any device at all. When they use tech, how much time can they use it for? So what day of the week, how much time, which devices are allowed? Is it only the main TV? Is it computers? Is it an iPad? Is it your phone? Is it their phone? Really think about what is allowed, which device. Which games or apps or access do they have? If they're playing video games, are you a family that allows mature games or are you not? We were very strict about that. We did not allow that. What do they have access to? Do they have access to shows that are beyond their emotional or mental maturity? You have to think about these decisions and pre-decide. That's really the most important part, is just having a plan, just figuring it out. So that way you're not every day going, oh, I don't know. Should I let them use the iPad? I don't know. Just decide. And then you communicate it to them. So you get to say your limit of when they can use device, where they can use device, and for how long. So you can say, you are welcome to use the computer for 30 minutes as long as the conditions that you set. So conditions could be that chores are done, they've been outside, they've moved their body, they've done non-screen entertainment, or that there were no problems getting off the devices the day prior. Or you can use a combination. So let me give you some examples of limits. You are welcome to use your device as long as there are no problems getting off. So you give them the video game controller or the iPad or something like that. And then you say, here you go, you have 30 minutes. And then 30 minutes later, you're like, hey, time's up. It's time to turn off your device. And they start fighting and begging and kicking you and throwing things at you. And you just say, oh, looks like there's some problems getting off. I'll wait. You wait a few minutes. You let them settle down. Don't try to get in a tug of war or anything like that. Just kind of wait. And then the next time they have option to use it, you say, oh, nope, I'm not going to let you use your screen today because I don't want to have to worry about you having trouble getting off of it like last time. And that's it. Here's some more. You can play mature video games once you are blank age. You can just make it a rule. You can play mature video games once you are 14. If they're 9 and they want to play a game, you say no. Just say no. You are welcome to have a social media account once you are blank age. I would suggest 14. There is some guidelines that is saying 16, but I say 14 is probably the earliest that they should have any sort of social media account. I will be happy to pay for your cell data plan as long as you keep location tracking on. You can use the tablet as long as you rest in your room for 30 minutes. Or you can just say, screen time is in this house. It's from 4 to 5 as long as your homework is done. You can also say, we don't do any screens until after dinner. That's just how it is in this family. You get to make the rules in your family, and you just be confident in your reasons. Don't feel the need to explain all your reasons to your kids, and don't argue or justify or lecture or try to convince them and tell them how the screens will rot their brains and all that stuff. That doesn't really help. All that helps is that you have a rule. Your children don't really understand how sugar affects their bodies long term or how the lack of fiber will hurt their tummy. They don't need to know all that. You know that. And you just tell them the rules. No matter what your screen time limits are, the most important predictors of success are commitment and confidence. Stay committed to it. So now limits, they're kind of the easy part, like setting up the rules, it's the resistance to the limits is hard, right? It's that boredom gap, that dysregulation, that frustration, that jealousy. I've shared this before, that Lincoln wanted to start playing Minecraft when he was in 3rd grade, which was 8 years old. And we said he couldn't play video games till he was 12. So he waited 4 full years while his peers were doing video games. And that was really hard for him. And he complained a lot about it. The third part about having screen time limits is showing compassion. Allowing your children to express their feelings, to be compassionate about it. You're going to want to punish them even further sometimes if they complain or argue. And it's like, if you don't stop complaining, you're never getting your iPad again or whatever it is. Try not to connect that boredom gap with the use of the screen. So just kind of allowing for those big feelings, and then maybe if they create problems during that big feeling cycle, to do a consequence that's different, like doing a couple extra chores or play with you or help you with the kitchen or something like that, because you don't want to make the screen time limits unclear, right? We want to just know this is what we allow in our family, and you get to use the devices on these days at this time, as long as there are no problems getting off them. So of course, as somebody kind of goes step by step, they're like, figure out a plan, communicate your limit, hold your boundary, have compassion, that you're like, yeah, right. Easier said than done. So I want to acknowledge that creating these kinds of boundaries and limits can be really challenging, especially if you are resetting some overuse. If your kids have become reliant on devices, they're going to resist these new rules, and it's going to be difficult. But I want you to know that that difficulty is temporary, that actually your children crave real life interaction. They crave using their body. They crave being outside. We need to trust that their natural species-based biology is going to be dominant, and they will be able to overcome that quick need for satisfaction by just trusting and letting them work through it and get to the other side. I have watched my kids detox from digital screens and we've done screen-free days, we've done screen-free weeks, we've done, digital detoxes. And whenever we get out of balance, I've done those things. And I've always seen that my kids are better behaved, happier, more likely to be creative, more likely to entertain themselves when they don't have devices at the ready. So trust on the other side is peace and ease, even when it's difficult in the middle. Trust that your values of creating an emotionally healthy kid are the most important. It can be hard, but it's worth it. And that's what I want to leave you with, that a screen-free mindset might be hard, but it's worth it. All right. I hope this episode has been helpful. I really do. I hope you don't go beat yourself up about anything, because that's not necessary. We're all doing our best. We're all trying to figure out what to do. And I'm here for you. And so if you want to figure out a screen plan for your family and you want to book a complimentary consultation with me to talk about this, I'd be happy to talk about it with you. If you want to join the Calm Mama Club and just work through this with us, we'd be happy to have you there. That's a membership program. It's $30 a month. And I'm here for you. So you reach out if you need anything. Let me know how it's going. I'm just also really curious about how this is landing for you and whether you feel pressure or you feel relief or hope or something. All right. I hope you are having a great week, and I will talk to you next time. Hey mama, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, I want to encourage you to do two things. The first is go to my website, calmmamacoaching.com, and get a copy of the Stop Yelling cheat sheet. You'll get a step-by-step breakdown of the most important tool I teach, which is the pause break. And you'll also get 40 ideas to reset your body and balance your nervous system so you don't have to yell at your kids. You can get a copy of that, again, at my website, calmmamacoaching.com/stop yelling. The other thing I'd love for you to do is go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review this podcast so that other moms can discover empowering and helpful, practical parenting strategies, just like you did today. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. It means a lot to be in your ear every week and to support you on your parenting journey.